The sun hung low over the neighborhood, casting long shadows across the meticulously manicured lawns and pristine white fences that hemmed in each identically charming home. This was the realm of the homeowners association, where conformity was king, and each blade of grass stood at attention, a green army in service to order. Here was where I found my quiet corner of the world, or so I had hoped. My first encounter with Karen happened on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday. I was wrestling a vintage armchair, a remnant of my grandmother's eclectic taste, from the back of my truck. It was not fancy by any means, but it had a character, a deep mahogany frame and sage-green upholstery that whispered stories of a time when furniture was built to last. To me, it was a piece of home. To Karen, it was a neon sign flashing one word: different. She approached with the determination of a storm cloud, her presence casting a shadow on the afternoon sun. I noticed the way her eyes flickered over the armchair, a distaste curling her lips into a tight line. Karen, the self-appointed guardian of community standards, was the embodiment of the HOA's spirit, a spirit I had yet to learn could be suffocating. Her voice, crisp and cutting, pierced the suburb's serene facade. I didn't even need to hear her to know the gist of her complaints. The armchair was too bold, too expressive for her vision of uniform perfection. "Doesn't belong," she might have said. The words weren't new to me. They had followed me like a shadow through much of life, an echo of places and people who feared what did not mirror themselves. Yet, standing amid the gentle whispers of the breeze and the quiet hum of distant lawn mowers, I felt a strange peace. Her attempt to needle me was like a child's spitball thrown at a stone wall. Effort wasted, impact none. In my silence, I met her judgment with calm defiance, a subtle acknowledgement that her power over me was imaginary at best. She retreated, a lioness still in search of prey, leaving behind the subtle scent of her discontent. The neighborhood, in its stillness, seemed to exhale. I resumed my task, the armchair finding its place on my porch, a silent sentinel of individuality against the sea of sameness. Days passed, each more revealing of the dance we would do. Karen's petty campaigns were predictable in their severity, but not in their creativity. A note left on my door, an email bristling with thinly veiled threats about property values and community image. Each attempt to press me back into the box she deemed acceptable was met with the same unwavering patience. My response was not one of retaliation or anger. I had learned long ago that true strength lay not in the loudness of one's voice, but in the steadiness of one's stride. Let her worry over lawn edges and chair colors. I would not bend, but I saw no need to break her either. There was a subtle power in my resistance, a quiet defiance that seemed to baffle her more than any overt rebellion might have. In my heart, I felt a growing sense of certainty and a twinge of irony that perhaps I had found the perfect place after all. This dance with Karen was not just about one chair or one house. It was about carving out a space where I could belong on my terms, amidst the neat rows of houses and the rigid rules meant to shape us all into one image. Perhaps that was the real revenge, to exist boldly in the face of conformity, to plant roots where others saw only weeds. The house next door was just the beginning. Sunlight streamed through my window, revealing the morning in soft pastel hues. Yet, hidden behind the tranquil facade, the day promised the familiar chaos that Karen, my neighbor, seemed to perfectly orchestrate. Her presence was an unexpected tornado in my otherwise serene world, one I now lived beside in a house that was meant to be my refuge. As predicted, she escalated her campaigns of control and chaos with military precision. It began innocuously enough, a polite note on my door about lawn length. I smiled at the absurdity, picturing her measuring each blade of grass with a ruler. But beneath the veneer of civility lay the seeds of something more pernicious. Her influence spread through the HOA like wildfire, Absurd rules began to sprout, each one seemingly designed with me in mind. Trash cans now had to be precisely 3 inches from the curb, a regulation noted with an archaic flourish on a neatly printed flyer. An emotional symphony played out on her behalf, each note a subtle jab, a reminder of the power she wielded over this little patch of suburbia. Unfair citations followed, delivered with bureaucratic precision. A parked car half an inch over the line, a garden gnome deemed too whimsical, a mailbox not aligning with community aesthetics, each citation a badge of her relentless pursuit. The paper trail grew, a testament to her meticulous dedication. I could almost hear her satisfied chuckle as each one landed on my doorstep. Gossip, her most potent weapon, spread with the eerie efficiency of a well-rehearsed script. At the coffee shop, whispers followed me like shadows. In the grocery store, glances lingered a fraction too long. My presence was a topic of hushed conversations, the quiet outsider who dared to challenge the status quo. Inside, I felt a simmering anger, a quiet storm brewing just beneath the surface, yet I refused to let it consume me. I was not here for her approval. My roots were planted firmly now, nourished by defiance and the quiet resilience she underestimated. I saw in her actions not just the pettiness, but a profound loneliness cloaked in bravado. Occasionally, our paths crossed in the physical world. Her smile was a taut string, ready to snap as she nodded in greeting. Her eyes held a glint of satisfaction, a silent proclamation of her perceived victories. But I remained undeterred. Each new rule, every citation, was a testament not to my failings but to her fear of losing control. Her fortress of rules and gossip, built so painstakingly, was a prison of her own making. As days passed into weeks, my resolve strengthened. My house, my decision to stay. These were my quiet acts of rebellion. Each morning, the sun rose over my home with the promise of a new day, a new battle, and a step closer to reclaiming the peace that had first drawn me here. In the distance, Karen's curtains fluttered, a prelude to her next move. I watched, unmoved, my shadow stretching across the lawn in silent challenge. This was not just a story of conflict. It was a tale of endurance, a testament to the quiet power of standing one's ground amidst the storm. The sun rose with a gentle insistence, painting the horizon in hues of gold and pink, as if to hint at the dawn of a serene day. A deceptive calm, I mused, staring out from the bay window of my newly acquired fortress. The house next door was still, its shutters closed like a wary eye, unwilling to see the world. Karen's realm, her empire of manicured lawns and precise hedges, where only her word was law. But now, here I was, nestled at its edge, a quiet interloper in the kingdom she held so dearly. The previous weeks had been a whirlwind of paperwork, signatures, and knowing smiles from the real estate agent who had sensed the undercurrents of this peculiar vendetta. The neighborhood had yet to awaken. Silence reigned supreme, save for the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional bird daring to chirp. I relished it, a canvas of quiet before the inevitable storm. It was here, amidst the hush, that I laid the groundwork of my subtle rebellion. I documented everything. Every passive-aggressive note slid under my door, every glare from across the way, every violation notice she conjured from thin air. Her pettiness was predictable, almost comedic in its consistency, a tyrant in suburban armor, wielding bylaws like a sword. Her attempts to unnerve me were met with calm acceptance. My poker face became a shield, unyielding and serene. Each encounter added to a growing dossier of absurdity, a thickening plot in the novella of our suburban standoff. Tension was an ever-present guest at our shared boundary. There was a certain irony in my choice of action. I began cultivating a garden, a modest affair at first, with wildflowers and creeping vines that dared to defy the rigid lines of her property. Nature's rebellion, I thought, softly chaotic in its beauty. The garden thrived under my care, a vibrant patchwork of color spilling over onto the clean line of her yard. There was no law against beauty, no bylaw forbidding the encroachment of nature. Each petal, a declaration of independence, each leaf, a whisper of defiance. I knew it tested her patience. Her clipped messages became more frequent, her air of superiority fraying at the edges, yet she underestimated the quiet power of persistence. Every letter she sent I filed away, every sideways glance I matched with an easy smile. Then one morning, as the dawn unfurled its golden tendrils, I received the letter. A final notice, she'd called it, her scrawl almost frantic in its demand for conformity. Such drama, I thought, tracing the lines of ink with my finger, and then the turning point. A moment of irony so perfect it could only be served cold. I sent my reply, a single sheet, crisp and deliberate, accompanied by a photograph of her own violations, captured meticulously over the weeks. Her garden gnomes, unauthorized by her own draconian standards, stood as silent witnesses to her hypocrisy. The silence that followed was palpable, a thick pause in the symphony of our discord. It was then, and only then, that I allowed myself a small victory. The weight of her authority seemed to falter, if only for a moment. Across the fence her shutters remained closed. The kingdom was quiet, the queen unseated by her own hand. In this battle of wits, the house became more than a structure. It was a symbol of resistance, a testament that sometimes the quietest voices carry the sharpest truths. And so, as the sun set in a blaze of defiant glory, I smiled. The game was far from over, but for now the garden bloomed and peace reigned anew. The morning light filtered through the blinds like muted gold, casting stripes over the stack of architectural plans on my kitchen table. The culmination of weeks spent with contractors, designers, and a touch of my own mischief. My new home, strategically situated next to Karen's, was taking shape as a testament to quiet defiance. In the beginning, the neighbors had watched with mild curiosity. Construction trucks rumbling down the street, the clink of hammers and the whir of saws were novelties that briefly interrupted their morning rituals. Initially, they saw only the dust and inconvenience. But, as walls rose and the outline of the house emerged, curiosity edged into something sharper. A question mark aimed at the harmony Karen so desperately clung to. Karen herself was a constant presence, her silhouette often visible through the lace curtains, a specter in her own domain. She watched with hawk-like precision, her dissatisfaction growing as each beam was set in place, each brick laid with careful precision. She'd crafted this neighborhood to her own image of perfection, and now an unpredictable variable had been introduced. The tension was palpable. Like the charged air before a summer storm, it crackled, invisible, but omnipresent. I reveled in these moments of uncomfortable stasis, knowing that the tiny disturbances I introduced were more effective than a direct confrontation. The grass of her meticulously groomed lawn seemed to wilt under her gaze, almost aware of her growing discontent. I had become a specter, too, but one of silent rebellion. I roamed the property with a painter's eye, overseeing each detail, ensuring it whispered my intent, not screamed it. The subtle clash of modern design with the surrounding homes was deliberate, a reminder of change, an artful juxtaposition to the uniformity Karen prized above all else. The neighbors began to take sides. Some, probably stirred by a latent desire for change or merely entertained by the unfolding drama, nodded approvingly as they passed by. Others, perhaps out of loyalty to the status quo or fear of the unknown, whispered behind cupped hands. Beneath the surface, currents shifted. The garden club meetings, once peaceful affairs of flower arrangements and polite chatter, now buzzed with barely concealed tension. Karen presided over them with a brittle smile, her fingers often tapping a staccato rhythm against the porcelain cups, a metronome of her internalized frustration. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, it happened. The moment that brought everything into sharper focus. As I stood by the newly planted hedges, admiring the delicate interplay of green against the soft earth, a voice cut through the air. A single pointed line delivered with the precision of a scalpel. "Think you can change everything, don't you?" Karen's voice. It hung there, suspended, a challenge wrapped in condescension. The neighbors halted their walks, their conversations pausing mid-breath, attention snagged by the sudden shift in the air. I turned slowly, not in surprise, but in acknowledgement. Her eyes held mine, a battle of wills in the open arena of suburbia. She had finally spoken, breaching the unspoken rules of civility to confront the upheaval I represented. But words were only the beginning. Silence followed, thick and heavy, as if the very atmosphere held its breath, awaiting my response. I merely smiled, a quiet, knowing tilt of the lips. It was a smile that spoke volumes, a reflection of the power I held not by force, but by mere presence. No words needed. The house next to hers said enough. The tension would linger, the neighborhood's delicate balance forever altered. Yet in this moment, there was a grim satisfaction in knowing that sometimes the simplest of actions, a purchase, a build, a smile, could be the most profound form of revenge. It was with a peculiar satisfaction that I sat behind my desk, an island of calm amidst the quiet storm swirling around me. The legal documents were laid out before me, their pristine edges sharp enough to cut through the fog of the past months. I ran my fingers over the embossed letterhead, feeling the weight of what they represented. Ownership, influence, closure. Karen had been relentless in her crusade against my presence. Her whispered accusations and pointed looks, like the gnarled branches of a weathered tree, reached further than I ever anticipated. Yet here I was, rooted firmly in my resolve, with a plan as meticulously crafted as her grievances were arbitrary. I had consulted a lawyer discreetly, one who specialized in real estate and property law, adept at weaving through the labyrinthine clauses and covenants that Karen so worshipped. What she saw as her armor, I saw as a tapestry, threads waiting to be rewoven to my design. In the neighborhood, the leaves had begun their flamboyant descent, painting the streets with hues of gold and copper. The season was changing, as was the atmosphere. A subtle shift, as palpable and inevitable as the encroaching chill of autumn. The leaves crunched beneath my feet like brittle reminders of what must be left behind. I watched Karen from a distance, her rigid posture a silhouette against the waning afternoon sun. She moved with a sense of entitled purpose, oblivious to the quiet undercurrents swirling beneath her domain. The house next to hers stood empty, a silent sentinel in our unfolding drama. It was mine now, in more ways than one. The documents were signed, each stroke of the pen a deliberate step toward reclaiming my place, and with each signature, a piece of the puzzle slid into place. I had no intention of flaunting this victory. It was a quiet revolution, intimate in its execution. She would learn soon enough. The irony would not be lost on her, a bitter taste she could not swallow. As the days passed, I maintained my composure, an inscrutable mask that belied the small triumph simmering beneath. Karen's eyes, always watchful, darted with suspicion whenever I passed, but she never imagined the depth of my resolve, nor the breadth of the change I orchestrated. The final step came with the delivery. A simple envelope slipped under her door, a legal notice, devoid of malice, yet potent in its implications. The HOA had rules, and I had found their flexibility. With strategic precision, I had ensured her overzealous interpretations were rendered null. Her power diluted, her voice dimmed. For the first time, her front yard, a meticulously curated expression of her control, felt oddly still. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying with it the scent of inevitability. I stood by the window, watching her reaction unfold like a play. Her face, a canvas of disbelief and reluctant acknowledgement, was a masterpiece of unintended consequences. In that moment, I felt a peculiar sense of peace, the quiet kind that follows a storm when the air is clear and the sky stretches wide, unmarred by the shadows of conflict. I had found my place, not just beside her, but above the pettiness that had tried to define me. It was over, and yet it was just beginning. A new chapter, written on my terms. The morning sun filtered through the leaves, casting a dappled pattern on the sidewalk. I walked slowly, savoring the crisp air that carried the scent of autumn. Each step felt deliberate, grounding me in the moment. The street was quiet, a tranquil picture of suburban life. Yet beneath this serene surface, tectonic shifts were underway. Karen's house loomed ahead, a fortress of manicured perfection. Her perfectly symmetrical lawn seemed to glower at me, an extension of her rigid persona. For the first time, though, it was not an intimidating sight, but a beacon of change. The once iron grip she held over the neighborhood was slipping. I had witnessed her unraveling, subtle at first, like the faintest tremor before an earthquake, but now the cracks were undeniable. The community had begun to see through her pristine facade. Her reign of whispered judgments and veiled threats was faltering. It started with the small things, the way neighbors paused, hesitant to approach her with grievances, the sidelong glances shared at community meetings where her voice, once a commanding presence, now felt like an echo of something past. Her influence waned as people realized there was a life beyond her dictations. Change is a slow tide, but relentless. It wears down even the sturdiest of stones. My own proximity had sparked this shift. The irony was not lost on me. By nesting right beside her, I became a symbol, a reminder of what she could not control. My presence was a quiet resistance, a steady pulse of defiance that resonated with the others, and they leaned into it, however tentatively at first. My garden, unassuming in its wildness, became a gathering place. Neighbors would stop by under the guise of borrowing a cup of sugar or sharing surplus zucchini from their vegetable patches. Conversations sprouted there, genuine connections unfurling like leaves seeking sunlight. We spoke of reclaimed spaces, of freedom from unnecessary rules. We shared stories and laughter, bonds forged in the gentle rebellion of community. The real turning point, though, was subtle, almost poetic. The day a child's laughter echoed from my yard, uncontrolled and exuberant. It was a sound so pure, so devoid of the restraint that Karen's domain demanded. It reverberated through the street, a symphony that dismantled walls. It was impossible to ignore, even for her. I saw Karen's curtains twitch, her profile outlined against the window, eyes narrowed in that familiar disapproval. But the world beyond her window had changed. Her frown was met not with silence, but with more laughter, more joy. Her authority was slipping, replaced by something she could never dictate: community spirit. I stood on the threshold of my home one evening, watching as twilight painted the sky in hues of pink and gold. The street was alive with quiet conversations, the glow of porch lights illuminating faces that were once strangers, but now shared in an unspoken alliance. Karen, relegated to her corner, watched from her porch. She was silent, her presence a mere shadow of what it once was. The authority she wielded had dissipated, not with a dramatic confrontation, but with the gentle persistence of change. I could feel the irony in the air, a delicious turn of fate that tasted almost sweet. As I turned to go inside, I caught Karen's eye. For a moment, just a flicker, There was something there, perhaps realization, perhaps resignation. It was difficult to say, but I knew, in that silent exchange, that the neighborhood had finally been restored. The balance returned. The street was not just a collection of houses, but a community, and that, I knew, was the sweetest revenge of all.